we have Steven Stamp with us, author and editor at Inside Lacrosse, IL Indoor. Check out the website where you can see his musings and where he gets into a little more detail that we can't necessarily cover in all these videos. But thanks for coming back. We've got another week with a bunch of exciting highlights.
We do. And of course, we always like to share an uncommon highlight or several during the week. And we're going to start with our uncommon highlight this week, which is I play that, you're going to see if you're following the league, but you just don't often see this happen. Josh Byrne gets awarded a penalty shot, while Buffalo gets awarded a penalty shot for an illegal substitution within the last 2 minutes of the game. Josh Byrne takes it. He is money. But on this case, the great Dylan Ward makes the save and then just Byrne is laying there. Ward wants to head to his bench. He just steps over him. And it is so funny. You just don't see this very often. He walks right over top of Josh Byrne, and I just had to laugh and laugh. And I will say, I saw people comparing it to Allen Iverson walking over an opponent in an NBA game. And let's just not. They weren't at all the same. Iverson did that. You can see the way he does it. It's intended to show disrespect. It's intended to be, I don't know, a middle finger to the guy he's stepping over. Ward's just stepping over here. Dylan Ward has more class in his little finger than Allen Iverson has in his whole body. So let's not make that comparison. This is just a funny moment where, Ward's heading to the bench the way he always does when there's a break. And Josh Byrne just happens to be there, and Ward very respectfully steps clearly over him, doesn't step on him. And Ward's like, yeah, I'm going. It's not something he sat there and thought about and
How
tried to show disrespect.
how tall is Dylan Ward though? Because I would imagine he steps over things a lot when I look at that and realize how tall he
Yeah.
is, like standing next to the ref or standing next to the pipes.
Yeah, he's a fair-sized dude. He's I'm trying to think exactly how tall he is. I can certainly find it in a sec. But no, he's a big guy. I'm gonna guess 6'5", and let's see how close I am. So that's
I
pretty tall.
I was gonna say 6'4", 6'5" is what I thought. So yeah,
Yeah, we're gonna double check and be absolutely certain he is 6'5".
perfect.
A
Yeah,
very tall Orangeville native.
yeah, that was
Um,
a great call on the height as well. So what is up with Orangeville? Why is it that they have? It's like the pinnacle of goalies. Like, is it the youth program there? Is it because there's so much offensive talent they get to practice, or
There's a lot of factors. I think you're touching on a bunch of them. One is it's such a lacrosse town. I mean, Orangeville is not the biggest place. So similar to somewhere like, I mean, it's quite a bit smaller, I think, than Peterborough, but Peterborough is another example of something that's a town that's away from a lot of places. And lacrosse really has caught on, and that's what people do. In Orangeville, even more so of a focus on this sport, with such a great background and history in the sport. And yeah, there's tons of players, tons of really good players, and they do. The goalies are going to face challenges. I think for all the players at all positions, you have the huge factor is the players who go back and coach. You'll see NLL players coaching at Pee Wee level and below, like guys will coach, and you see that in lots of places where guys will coach their kids as they come up. But Orangeville players go back and coach, and they're not all like, oh, I have to coach junior A, which nothing wrong. You need good people coaching junior A, but they have excellent coaching up and down the ranks, and that helps everyone get better. And goalies probably get the least coaching of any position. So maybe that commitment from Orangeville players to go back and coach helps because it gives a chance with high level coaching, because it's so hard to coach goalies. So if NLL guys are there, at least maybe they're making sure the goalies get some coaching. But yeah, I mean, the string of guys, right, with um, obviously Nick Rose and Evan Kirk and Dylan Ward and Chris Origlieri. And I
it
mean,
just seems like everybody
Cameron
when you
Dunkerley is an
yeah.
Orangeville guy, right? And he had to go out to Victoria just to get to play in Junior B. And now they've got a kid coming up next year with the Junior A's that he's not going to be much of a drop off from Origlieri. So yeah, it's an amazing factory.
Yeah, and the NABLL actually had two Orangeville goalies for their. I think it's shoot, which team is it? I want to say it's the Wheat Kings have a goalie from there who like
Hmm.
was grew up there and was in the system. But I remember Bob Leary talking about it. He's like Orangeville, which is just a factory for box lacrosse goalies. He goes, it seems like everybody comes from there. And then he went into the history with some of the guys, and I was like, wow, that is impressive. That basically every league almost that I cover seems to have a Orangeville guy, as a goalie. with maybe the exception of Can-Am.
Yeah, and it really does go back to Chris Sanderson as well, who is just iconic, one of the all-time greats in box and field, represented Canada a bunch, was one of the great goalies, and just, tragically lost early, but he was just a inspiration, I think, for a lot of goalies, particularly in Orangeville. So there's a pretty solid history there.
Yeah, no, I
And there's
love.
a lot of fun when Dylan Ward stepped over Josh Burke.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah, so a great uncommon highlight, and with that uncommon highlight, let's get into the jersey. So, what are we wearing this week?
Yeah, we're gonna go with the Syracuse Stingers. Now, there is a team, the Syracuse Stingers, that exists now. They've got a yellow and black thing going on with the honeycomb. It's pretty cool. This is the original Syracuse Stingers from the 1974-75 National Lacrosse League, the original version of the NLL before the Eagle Pro Box League, before that became MILL, Major Indoor Lacrosse, and which then morphed into the NLL. This is from 74 and 75. The Stingers in particular were 1974, and what a roster they had. There were some issues with coaching. They wound up actually not making the playoffs in their only season. Then they went to Quebec to become the Caribou. Another great jersey. I've been pushing Jamie Plunkett from Uncommon Fit to find me a Caribou jersey. I love them, but yeah, they had quite a lineup. The ultimate lacrosse player, probably Gaylord Paulus, just all time great. Guys like Johnny Morady and Terry Sanderson, Buff McCready, one of the great goalies, and Alfie Jacques, the legendary stick maker, all on that Syracuse Stingers club back in 1974.
Yeah, Syracuse is one of those towns that has just a lot of people don't. I know maybe you guys more in Canada, but in the United States, a lot of people don't realize that Syracuse and Onondaga are. Syracuse is built inside the Onondaga Nation essentially, and
Mm-hmm.
the amount of talent that they've gotten there and why they have always had such a storied lacrosse history between that, and then you've got the Powell brothers a few hours down the road in Watertown. These random lacrosse pockets that pop up, kind of like we're talking with Orangeville. But a an amazing jersey. And was Travis Cook on that team?
He was.
Yes. So
Look at
Travis
you.
is Alex's father. That's how I know because
Oh, there you go.
somebody told me one time they're like, look up Travis Cook. They're like, yeah, Alex is good, but go look up his dad for a little bit and see some of the
So
stuff.
often that's the case, right?
Yeah.
And this is not an accident that I'm wearing it this week because we are going to Onondaga, which is, as I was about to say, outside of Syracuse, but you put it very well. Syracuse is basically created within the Onondaga Nation. And we're going down for the Northeast Invitational, which is going to be really exciting.
I'm super excited. We're going to have the first ever attempt at the wireless mics. I'd love to say it's going to be the wireless mics, but I will say attempt in case we fall through with that one. But I'm fairly confident. I ran the whole Yeti Talk show running the mic system to make sure it worked and got off of. It was very complicated to get it all sync up, but I think we've got it figured out now.
Nice.
So huge shout out to Jamie Plunkett. Thanks to Uncommon Fit. The link is in the description. And so many of these retro jerseys, if you go through and shop, they have a huge selection of retro jerseys. Some of the really coolest, the old school themes, and you just kind of see where design has gone and kind of what it's gone through the evolution. I really enjoyed it. I went down that Peterborough's Lakers Red Oaks kind of looking at all their jerseys throughout the years, and I was like, wow, good on Jamie to have them all posted and make them all available for everybody. So links in the description. Go ahead and check them out. Thanks so much to Uncommon Fit for making this happen.
And if you're a team and need your jerseys, obviously reach out. It's not just individual retros or anything. It makes great jerseys for teams.
Yeah, he's actually, I believe the Wings too, for out of the NLL is the team he supplies the jerseys for. But I know, yeah, he
Ooh,
does so many teams, and I believe he supplies the Wings jerseys. So huge shout out to what they're doing up there, Uncommon Fit. If you're looking to field a team, or if you just run a youth league and you need some scrimmage jerseys, practice jerseys, anything up there, get a hold of him. He will get you hooked up. So with that, let us now move on to this McConvey goal because I did
yes.
not realize that was the rule. I knew the rule about through the crease, but I did not realize how it ended up playing out. And I'll let you explain it because you'll probably do a better job. And then we'll. Do you want to look at the highlight first, or do you want to go through it?
Let's run it. Let's just run the goal, and we'll see what happens here. So huge game. Rochester's trailing. There's a shot here coming, and by Dan Coates actually. Thomas McConvey winds up getting the ball after Andrew Bargatti. You see, he scoops it up right there. This is a great play by McCombie to tap the ball out of the stick. It's up in the air. He grabs it and dunks it home. That is a fantastic play by Thomas McCombie. And it's called originally no goal because they say through the crease first to touch the ball, which absolutely enrages Rochester coach Mike Hazen because he says they had possession. There's a shot of him on the bench as he's yelling, "They had possession." You see it over and over, and we're going to see it right here. Just read his lips. It's not hard.
No, I was thinking that as I was clipping it, and that's why I made sure I kept it in the highlight because
Yeah,
he's clearly saying possession, possession.
they had possession. He says it several times, and the thing is, he's right. They did have possession. Now, did McCombie was he then the first player to touch the ball? Yes, he was. But I think actually that once Borgatti has possession and McCombie is then clear because he's out of the crease at that point. Borgatti establishes possession. McCombie can check him, right? Like Borgatti when he has the ball. I think Hazen's right that if that were the only issue, because McCombie's clearly in the crease here. You see his foot lands on the crease line. Borgatti comes up with the ball. He's got possession. Borgatti has possession. He cradles, he turns for sure. The old lacrosse move. The ball pops out. That's a great view of the ball popping out. McCombie, first guy to get it. You can see Thornbert wants to get there. He's just not quick enough. Boom, the ball's in the net before you even blink, right? And that is absolutely right. And then, but they waved it off. They said first to touch, which was probably not right. But then they go back. Chris Williams goes back in and reviews it again. And I'm going to point out that I think Chris Williams is a very good referee. I think he has a great eye. I think he understands the rules really well. Not great on the mic, not his forte. So he comes out and he goes in for the review, comes out, and he indicates quite well what the actual point of this whole call was. But the first thing he says is, "We still have no goal." Nobody in Rochester wants to hear that. Hazen doesn't want to hear that. Are they listening to the rest of it? Because the rest of it is what matters. And let's watch it again. And the part is, as Borgatti goes to pick it up, McCombie is going to check. And you see Chris Williams, the ref, make the indication he checked down on him. So there, Borgatti goes to pick it up. Let it run. Right there. That is the point. Can we go back and just see that again? It's when McCombie checks Borgatti right there. He's gone through the crease. There he is in the crease. Boom. He checks the stick of Borgatti. He's come through the crease and then checks an opposing player. That waves the play down and makes it no and makes play dead. Now, they didn't call that right at the time. And honestly, I don't blame them. There's 6 guys in very close proximity, 7 if you count the goalie. There's a lot happening, a lot of feet, a lot of sticks. There's the ball. I don't really blame them for not getting that. But on second review, I guess, it becomes quite clear that as soon as McCombie checked the stick of Borgatti, play is dead. That's it. Or should have been dead. So they got it right. The problem was that when he came out and said, we still have no goal, he just shouldn't have said that. He should have just explained it and then said we still have no goal, because they got it right. They absolutely got it right. And it's a very particular detail that you have to pick up on, right? And I'll admit that at first I was like, yeah, they did have possession, but does that matter? Because he's still the first to play the ball. But then, yeah, they had possession. That resets it. So it is very tricky. And kudos to them for getting it right. Chico, next time, announce what happened before you let them know that there's still no goal, because
Well,
nobody was listening.
yeah, he did it great on the first call, essentially, when he, no goal
Mhm.
at the end of it. And then he comes back
Yeah.
out for this explanation. And this is as soon as he waves off the goal, like you said, everybody starts going. He's like, "Hang on, guys!" And it's like, "Well, no, it's too late for
Let me
this already."
explain. But you see that he moves his hand down, so he checked down on the ball, and it's the absolute right call. And I mean, it's a huge moment in a huge game for these two teams who are both badly. I mean, New York with that win, excellent chance to be in the playoffs, something like a 67% chance. Rochester with that loss, terrible chance to make the playoffs, something like 30% or 27%. So it's and they're down by 5, trying to get some momentum going. And Rochester's got the potential to score a bunch of goals. but they needed to get some. And I get it. I get why Hazen was upset. I get why the fans didn't like it, but it was right.
Yeah, no, that was the first time I'd ever heard that rule actually, is I did not know. I knew obviously if they went through the crease, they could not be the first player to get the ball and score,
Mhm.
but I did not realize that if you go through the crease, you also can't be involved in the play at all. I mean, you see so
Yeah,
many times the guys, they just like, they stand like, like a tree
yeah,
essentially. Like, don't throw
yeah.
me the ball, I can't be involved. And
Yeah,
yeah,
because you can't even stand like if the ball rolls over and you've gone through the crease, you can't even stand there between an opponent and the ball and restrict them from getting to it. You have to be out of the way. Like you have to let them play the ball. And I think the really tricky part about it is that the idea is you can't go through the crease to gain an advantage, right? So that would be very subjective if you start thinking about that. So as you go through the crease, you play because if you cut through the crease, you can shave off a few feet and get to the ball first, or get to somebody who's playing it earlier than you would have. In this case, McConvey actually, by stepping in the crease, was a little further away from Brigatti, right? It didn't give him any advantage. He just happened to step barely on the crease, and he had no idea. I don't think as he's turning that his left heel landed on the crease line. He's
yeah.
just playing hard, going after it. It's a great play, but it's a tricky one. This is one of the more nuanced calls I think a ref has to face. So again, kudos to them for getting it right in the end.
Yeah, no, I would say we basically had two uncommon highlights that could definitely
Yeah.
go with the jersey because what really made that one uncommon was it's not a rule that you see called very often because normally guys don't get involved. They know that they've gone through the crease and they don't get involved. And when they do, like you said, it's blown. You'll hear the whistle before it actually
Mhm.
the goal goes in. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
that was huge. And speaking of uncommon men, I think we're kind of going into another guy and you wrote a piece on him a little while ago, essentially explaining how this is his year to be the goalie of the year. Like he is putting on his best performance, and that's kind of they talked about. This was a little interview after the game where
Mhm.
they talked to him, and he had actually just set the record, right?
He set the Toronto Rock record with his 106th win for them. That moved him one ahead of Bob Whipper Watson. And it was his 107th win, which ties him with Patty O'Toole for second in NLL wins by a goalie. He had one win in Boston. He only played like 20 minutes, but it was a game where they came back and won. So he got the W. Didn't have any wins with Calgary, didn't play much with them. He had a fairly brief stint with Boston and Calgary, then came to Toronto and fairly quickly became the guy and has played ever since. And he's won a ton of games. Obviously, 106 games with them, 107 overall. He is now number two. Matt Vince has 156 and counting. So it's not like Rosie's going to go and get Vince at this point. I mean, who knows? I mean, I don't know if Matt Vince will ever stop playing. He could be 80 and still between the pipes. Who knows, right? But yeah, it's quite an accomplishment for Nick Rose, and this is his year. And I did write the piece that said, I get it. Everyone says, boy, Nick Rose should have won a goalie of the year by now because he's been so close, but he probably shouldn't have. Every year you can go through and say, there are a lot of times he was probably the second best goalie in the league, which makes you a great goalie over your career if you keep doing it. There's one year a few years ago where when you look at it, you can be like, maybe Rosie should have won that one. But there's nothing like I would say, 81 baseball where the Fernando Valenzuela, and I'm going way back, and a lot of you weren't even born then, but Fernando Valenzuela won shut up, won the Cy Young award when Tom Seaver clearly should have. But Valenzuela had a great rookie season. He was a phenomenon. He went 13-7, had some really good numbers. But Tom Seaver was 14-2, went 7-1 in each half of that interrupted season. Cincinnati got screwed because they were 4 games better than anybody else in the National League for the full season, but they finished half a game behind the Dodgers in one half and like a game and a half behind somebody in the other, and they wind up missing the playoffs. I don't even acknowledge the World Series that year, but that's just me being a bitter Reds fan. But I've looked at those numbers a lot. I think Tom Seaver should have won it. That's not that relevant here, except that I think Nick Rose had one season where you could say, yeah, maybe he should have got it, but this is the best year of his career, well into his career. His best 4 seasons are probably the last 4 seasons of his career. It's amazing how good he has gotten. He was already good. He has become really, really adept at applying his style of goaltending. And this year now, he is challenged by Chris Riglieri, by Christian Del Bianco, by Doug Jamieson. It's become a much closer race. I think, down the stretch because Rosie was running away with it early in the year. But it's a great season, a great. I'm not going to say capper to the career because I don't think Nick Rose is nearly done. I think he's so passionate about this. I imagine he'll keep doing it. Um,
Yeah,
but
their fans traveled really well. It's kind of I wanted to give a
yeah,
shout out to the Toronto fans. I know we're not that
mm-hmm,
far, but it's still a 5+ hour trek, probably, especially if you count the border crossing for a bunch
yeah,
of them. Martin's parents were sitting just behind me. That was pretty cool. You could hear them cheering, and he had a couple of good plays. I was actually kind of hoping he was going to score. He had a fast break at one point, and
yeah,
Charity was like, "Don't you dare!" I was like, "Oh, this would be so cool for his parents, though. He's running right down. They're sitting right
yeah.
here, and just to be able to." So thankfully they didn't, but it didn't seem to matter. They won anyways. But I think part of why Nick Rose doesn't is he's not a flashy goalie. He's not one of those like you watch guys that have that
Mhm.
pizzazz. And yes, he will make a big stick save, but he's such a
Yeah.
smart goalie. He anticipates so well and knows like where he needs to be more than
Mhm.
relying on athleticism to make that save.
Well, and he's a huge dude. I mean, and he knows his angles, like you said. I mean, he knows exactly how to make the most of his strengths, which are positioning, angles, knowing his arc. Like, you're not going to see him way out like the Dylan Ward height in the net or in the crease. Because he tried something like that earlier in his career several years ago, and they were scoring on dunks behind him constantly, dunks and backdoor things. So he moved back a bit and took that away, and he's found just the right spots, and he makes it look so effortless. But no, he's working really hard, both up here and physically. But he does make some spectacular saves. I mean, for the size of guy he is remarkably athletic, getting across the crease, and I'll tell you, his teammates who weren't dressed were pretty excited, and we're going to see that next as he came off the floor. They did that little interview with him, and then here he comes down the tunnel. They're ready. They're rocking. Here he comes. He has no idea they're waiting for him.
No.
I love the look on his face. Look at that smile as he comes through. He did not know that was awaiting him, and he really enjoyed it as well he should.
Yeah, no, kudos to Nick Rose. And that I love that. Those captures where you get like that little kid smile where the guys are just like, "Oh, that's awesome." Yeah,
Yeah.
that is impressive.
And the goalie goal, I mean, it's a 9-7 game with 5 seconds left when he throws that, 6 seconds left when he throws it. It's a meaningless goal, but goalie goals are a lot of fun. And Rosie's had a bunch of them. So, he's like Nick Damude level. Damude's been scoring a bunch lately. But yeah, this is just great. Rosie with the catch comes up so smoothly and lets it go. And I love the look here. Tom Schreiber's pretty fired up for Rosie to get that goal. And Nathan Grennan's like, just get that net off of the ball. Let's get out of here.
Yeah, no, Grennan has become one of my favorite Firewolves to watch. But I think
Yeah,
that like even the goalie goal, it's just a Nick Rose goal. He doesn't shoot the
yeah,
laser or all the way down.
yeah.
He just throws a nice straight pass that's going to bounce and roll into it. And quintessentially, I would just call that the Nick Rose goal. It very well fits him.
That's a great point because the thing, like with a lot of goalies, when they do score a goal, you can see like the ball comes in and you can almost see them thinking, "Hey, I got a chance at a goal here," and you can see them come up and throw it, and there's just some excitement to it. Nick Rose, he makes the catch, he comes up, he throws the ball. He could be throwing an outlet pass. You don't know. He just comes up and makes the play, and he's pretty chill. And I mean, he burns with a passion for lacrosse and for winning and for excelling, but he's also just, I mean, he's just so calm and cool, and yeah, it is. That's a great description. The ultimate or the quintessential Nick Rose goal.
Yeah, no, Dougie Jameson actually talked about like watching him and watching Dylan Ward and just that mentality of it. You can't tell looking at them if their team is down by 20 or up by 20. It's very businesslike and just focus on what you need to do next.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Until basically, I mean, you watch Dylan Ward and you'll see little flashes here and there of annoyance when things happen or frustration, but not much. Like he'll just lean back. He's got the classic, Ken Dryden lean back on the goal on the crossbar, but you also won't see a lot of over the top exuberance until they win a championship, and then he gets fired up when he gets his helmet off and they're going for the presentation. That's about it.
It's like the quiet guy. Once they finally let go, it's time to go. And speaking of a quiet guy kind of coming into his own, we've got Knox here. I'll let you explain it. You know how they just a subtle move for somebody, and wow, does it seem to work?
Yeah, Tracy Koleski talked after the game about how he thought they were misusing rookie Jason Knox, who was their fifth overall pick a couple of years ago. He went back to Ohio State for another year. I think it was Ohio State. And he said, we weren't employing him right. They put him at the top of the power play. And all of a sudden, boom, he explodes for 4 goals. And a lot of them, as you can see, this one here is another one that's on the power play. They just get it out to him, and he absolutely blasts this thing home. I mean, those are rockets to specific, very precise points. Great job by Jason Knox to take advantage of 4 goal game, an 8 point night. He had 10 points in the weekend with their pair of games, and was the rookie of the week for the NLL. And just a great job. He's a tremendous young player. And had a great. Now he's not going to score four goals a game on outside shots all the time, right? I mean, you're just not going to beat NLL goalies all the time with outside shots. But he is a terrific outside shooter, like nearly Andrew Q level. Who's probably one of the best from the outside right now. And the other thing is that Tracy Kolesky said, "Hey, we'd take him fifth again. We'd take him as high as third. We might have taken him first. We think he's that good." So I thought, let's take a look at the 2022 draft when they picked him.
Yeah, I was pretty
So
impressed with some of the other names on there that you see, and he's still sticking with it. So I mean, that just shows the confidence he has going in, in his potential.
yeah. Now, what do you, and I mean, what's he going to say? I mean, no, I think, if we had a chance to do it again, we'd probably grab, Matthew Gauthier, which they actually got a bit later. So that's not a
Alex
good example.
Simmons.
Well, they didn't have a chance for Simmons, right? So would you say, hey, if we had a chance, we'd take Simmons, we'd take McCombie?
Well,
You're not going to say that. You
he
might,
said they'd take him third, is all I was saying. Is if they had
yes,
kept the third pick, then
yeah,
yes, you would. I still would not take Jason Knox. I'm taking Simmons after the season he's had.
yes. Yeah, and I would have taken Simmons before the season. Simmons was my number 1 or 2 prospect going into the draft. He and McConvey were my top guys. Simmons was my pick for rookie of the year before this season, so I'm a big Simmons guy. McConvey or Knox, I'd probably still take Thomas McConvey. He's really good. Um, they both took a little while to really find their way this season, but I think that's a good comparison. I think anybody who's been watching the season, I think most people before the season would, if you're going back, take McCombie or Knox ahead of Dylan Watson, who's been good for Las Vegas, but isn't the same kind of impact player. I don't think that these guys are. Owen Grant's been huge for Vancouver, and I was a little surprised he went that early, but now you see him playing this year, and he's been great. Like such a key defensive contributor for them, scoring some transition goals. There's really nobody later that would jump super high in this draft. I mean, there's obviously some really good players in this first round. When Will Johansson gets to Albany, you're going to see the impact that he can have. I think Gauthier has been a really nice addition for Panther City, but he's not at that level. Zach Deacon was a steal at 8 for New York. He's playing very well. I think Seth Van Chappen's been substantially better than I thought he would be. I knew he was good, but he's been outstanding. He's not a forward. He's actually playing D tranny. He was a forward. He's playing D tranny for Calgary. He's been great in that role. Brett Dobson can be a game changer. There's players up and down that list that are very good. But yeah, no, Knox earned his spot up there, and you can see why they're so happy having him.
Yeah, no, the only one I saw that jumped out to me, and it's obviously because I'm an Albany fan, but Ty Kurtz sitting down there, and
Yeah,
Kurtz, if he did not have Alex Simmons on his team, everybody I think would be talking about Kurtz potentially being a rookie of the year.
yeah. Kurtz is another one that was just below the group we were looking at, and I know Albany was surprised that he was available. They were looking at him as a top 10 guy, and they were thrilled to get him because they really wanted. I mean, Simmons when he fell to 4, that was an easy pick. They really wanted Johansson. They were, Glenn Clark had been out in Nanaimo coaching where Johansson played, saw him play a lot. Was like, yeah, no, this kid's really something. They were thrilled to get him. I think Kurtz at 17, did they get him? 17 or
Yeah,
18?
17.
17. Yeah, unbelievable pick for them. And yeah, he's been great. And I mean, Cooper Perkins did a thing in his Lax Metrics, his analytics thing, where he said, hey, maybe Ty Kurtz is the rookie of the year. Maybe not, but just when you look at the advanced analytics, he's had a great season. I still go with Simmons because of the huge role he's played, how important he's been at turning that team around and their offense. But Kurtz has been a really key contributor too.
Yeah, and I wonder how that, makes everybody feel at home when you look and see Taggart Clark at 23 and Albany had how many picks before?
Um, yeah, Are you saying they should have taken him, or that
Well,
they
no,
might
I'm
have?
just, I'm just because it's his dad, but he has, honestly, when you saw him playing with New York, I think that's going to be a good fit for him.
Yeah, he's
Nice
very
to
good.
see him get in. Yeah, I think it just seems like a really good fit. I've been happy
Yeah,
watching him play for New York with the highlights, and it's funny how some of these teams, like he was having a decent season in Philadelphia, but I think
yeah,
the way New York plays, he's a better fit.
yeah. It fits him, and I mean, yeah, he's a good player. I think I know there's a lot of controversy about that trade. They gave up what's going to be a top three pick. It looks like in this draft. But this is not a great draft this year. They did their homework. New York knew that they weren't going to get a righty like they wanted in the spot they would be in. So they were pretty happy to get Taggart Clark, or very happy, and they were very happy with him. Now, the interesting thing, there's been a lot of coaches' kids who have been drafted lately by their parents, right? I mean, Jake Govett is not a coach's kid. Steve Govett was the president of the Seals when they took him in the first round. Mike Hazen took his kid. Well, again, Dan Carey, the GM, took Austin Hazen late in the first round with the comp pick. Kurt Stiers, the owner and GM of Halifax, took Wagaleat Bowhunter, his son, 10th or 12th overall, which was really early, especially when they had another late first round or later in the round. But again, all these guys taking their kids. Ryan Keenan was first overall pick by Derek Keenan, GM and head coach of the Rush back when he was selected. So there are all those examples, and so many guys want to coach them, and everyone was like, "Oh, Sean Williams is going to find a way to get to draft Dyson." He was not going to do that. Albany was not going to give up that pick. I can assure you from having talked to them that it would have taken a lot to make that pick move out to Las Vegas. They are happy to have Dyson Williams coming next year, and what an addition. But I'll tell you, Taggart Clark did not want to be drafted by Albany. He said, "Hey, Dad, don't draft me. I'd rather go and do this on my own and establish myself on my own and not be people saying, oh, it's because it's his dad or whatever. He wants to show what he can do, which is fine, which is terrific, for the young man. And Glenn Clark respected that. He also did point out, like as it got to if Ty Kurtz hadn't been there at 17, that's a tough one to not take Taggart, because that's where you should be taking him for sure, right? Like that's a pick where he is the logical guy for what they were looking for. So yeah,
That,
but
that
I mean,
that's
great
what I
for the
mean though.
Trojans.
Is just
Yeah,
it wasn't like you couldn't justify it. So for him to go
yeah,
for Kurtz instead, yeah. I honestly, so do they do a GM of the year or is it just coach of the
yes,
year?
they
I
did both.
don't think anybody can beat Glenn Clark right now. Nobody has had as impressive of a turnaround and looking smart as far as future picks as it has kind of come together this year for them. And just when you look at last year's season of what did they have, 3 wins all last year?
3 and 15. Yeah,
Yeah, so from 3 and 15 to the start they had, and then being able to maintain it with this. I mean, it's a very young team. Nobody can really
yeah,
argue it's not. But to be able
yeah.
to maintain and be in these close games with Toronto until the end, who Toronto is definitely in. To beat Buffalo twice, yeah, I don't know if anybody beats him. Is there anybody that you've got in your mind kind of thinking of?
Beating Toronto.
No, as far as beating like
Oh,
anybody more
oh,
deserving
Clark.
than Glenn
Oh
Clark
yeah,
for
yeah.
GM of the year.
He's, oh, I mean, I've got to make my vote for both for the NLL awards and the IL Indoor awards pretty soon, and Clarkey is up there for sure. I would argue that Kurt Molosky has had a fantastic impact on Vancouver already. Putting together that defense and some of the picks he's made, I think Mouse is up there. But yeah, I think it's almost like a cumulative, like what Clark's done over the last couple of years. Maybe he puts him ahead.
And as far as Milwaukee goes, I would probably consider him more of the coach of the year because he really criticized his guys when they came in out of shape
Mm-hmm.
and when he called them out after that press conference. And since then, you've seen him like as far as motivating goes as
Yeah.
a coach, though that team has really responded well to him.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that thinking that he's made such a difference as a coach. I just feel like the work he did as the GM in reconstructing the defense was fantastic, especially going in knowing that you know, hey, you don't have a goalie that most teams would be comfortable starting the season with. And Aaron Bold, who's an older goaltender, hasn't had a really strong season for a while. Terrific guy. I mean, just and has put in some really good work for them and a great teammate, but not not a guy at the top of his game at this point. And Aiden Walsh, who was a youngster. He's like 21, 22 years old, and his save percentage in his career in the NLL to this point was like 720 or something, or six something like it. He had not performed well. He had not played well yet in the NLL, and they went into the season with those guys and got the most out of Aaron Bold, and then Bold thoroughly supported Aiden Walsh when Walsh took over, and Aiden Walsh has been dynamite for them in this last stretch. He's him going in coincided or cause, depending how you look at it, them getting on their current winning streak that has got them in a pretty decent spot to try and grab a playoff position.
Well,
You see them sitting in the standings at
yeah,
7-9. They're right there.
and especially after the start of the season, though, it was just an abysmal
Mhm.
start. It was kind of one of those things that, as you're looking at it, you're like, nobody was excited when Vancouver was coming to play in their town. It wasn't like you're looking for, oh, wait, this is going to be a great game. We're going to get to see these stars. And yeah, no, I think for me, watching that speech, and I watch almost every game because of Owen, and the way
Yeah,
the team has responded to him. No, he's done an amazing job as a GM. I think I
yeah,
expect Vancouver to be a great program. I'm sure Calgary is really missing him. Not that Sanderson isn't a great coach, but I
yeah.
think with Mulaski, I think Calgary's a lock in the playoffs this year versus sitting on the outside.
Maybe. I mean, I think Calgary should probably be in the playoffs anyway. They just had a few games that didn't quite go their way. They've been very close, and you're going to have a culture change when you switch coaches. And Josh Sanderson, he's been an assistant coach. He hasn't been a head coach in the NLL before, so it does take a while. And I think Mouse is a great coach. I've always had a ton of respect for him. I also would point out that he replaced Troy Cordingley, who's had a ton of success in the National Lacrosse League and been a coach of the year as well. So it's not like Vancouver didn't have some good coaching. I think Kurt Malowski I think the combo of GM and head coach has made a huge difference. And I honestly, going into the season, was trying to tell everyone, hey, don't expect Vancouver to turn this around this year. It's going to be a 2 or 3 year process to really become a competitive team. And you watch the first half of the season, and people are like, "Oh, Vancouver's so disappointing." I'm like, "No, they were going through the things they're going to go through, but man, are they playing well!" And now they've beat a lot of teams that are down in the standings, so you have to have that in the back of your mind when you think about it. But they are really in the battle for the playoffs, and who would have thought that 5 weeks ago? And they are playing like a Kurt Malowski team, which, boy, that's going to be fun to watch over the next few years.
It is, and another team that I think had a pretty rough start, but Panther City has been looking very good. Unfortunately for them, the attendance never looks good. It is tough to watch when you're like, oh man, and they have so much talent down there too. It's hard to, yeah, they've been looking good. Not like you said, talking about
Mhm.
Daymood, when these young goalies are feeling it, and then they're getting the production out of Knox. It's going to be hard for anybody to knock out that Panther City or New York team.
Well, and Panther City's got Callum Crawford back after he missed a couple of weeks. He had 11 points over the weekend, and he's such a difference maker for them because he just makes everything around him a little more dangerous because you always have to be so he can score from anywhere and he can set up people from anywhere. So I think it's huge to have him over there with Jonathan Donville, and then you've got Knox on the left side and Gauthier who'll just bang through walls, go through anything for you. I mean, there's a lot, and Will Malcolm is leading the team. He's on pace to get 107 points this year. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of talent, and defensively, they've really come together. I mean, they play a nice team approach. I think, I give Steve Toll some credit there for being the defensive coach and how well they're playing, getting a lot of guys like Evan Messenger, who's having I mean, I was going to say a career season, but I mean, this is his career pretty much this season. He's struggled to get into the league, and not because he wasn't a good player. I think when I talked to Tracy Kluski earlier in the year, I said, "What's the difference?" He said he just believes in himself now. He just had to believe how good he was, and he comes in with that confidence. And Evan Messenger's been great, and they've got um, a bunch of guys. I mean, Matt Hossack is one of the best defenders in the league, and people don't really talk about him because his brother's just probably the best defenseman in the league, right? But Matt is really good. The captain of Panther City. You've got Connor Sellers that they picked up. They paid a lot for Connor Sellers, a player and a first round draft pick. to get Connor Sellers, but he's really good. I mean, they've got a lot of guys. Dylan Hutchison is a guy we've talked about before, who's really come into his own. Another guy who took a while to establish himself, but in this defense, he's playing very well. He's killing penalties. I mean, they have a lot going on in Panther City, and it's been a lot of growth. A lot of credit to Bob Hamley, the GM, and Tracy Kolesky, the head coach, and the assistant coaches. And yeah, they're a tough team, and I think Nick Damude is close to being at the level of the very top goalies in the league. And I think on his good days, he absolutely is. Or when he's on, he is on, and he is hard to beat. When he's not, he can be down by a bunch early because if he's shaky, and that's natural for young goalies, it happens. But I think Damian is not as consistent as the top goalies are at this point.
No, the nice thing about like where he's at and where Dunkerley's at is they're on teams that can afford to let them get through that kind of slump. Like nobody was expecting New York to dominate this year. They expect them to be better, obviously, but you obviously never want to have those games, but you're not expecting that team to win every game in the season or even be able to like where it's even close where you would think every night going in, okay, they're definitely going to win. They're definitely going to win.
True, but doesn't that make it more important that your goalie be consistent if the rest of the team you don't know what you're going to get from them
It
and they're still
does,
on the line?
but it's hard to get somebody that late. You to find an old goalie and get a trade for him who's really good is
Yeah,
way harder than well, I don't even know if
developing
it's way
from.
harder because trying to pick the guy and trying to decide when you pull him, when you let him wait, he needs to get his lumps, and when you cut your losses, and you're just like, this kid ain't working out.
Yeah,
It's a tough spot to be in, and I
it is,
always
and
say the goalie's the most underrated position on the floor.
so important. There's a dearth of goalies. There aren't enough goalies to keep up with expansion. I think there's lots of forwards. There's still lots of great forwards that we've seen. Some of the guys playing in the Arena Lacrosse League who are ready to go, and can step in and play in the National Lacrosse League and contribute. There are lots of defenders who are, who can go in and do good things and play a role but I mean, goalie is just so isolated and so exposed out there that if anything's going wrong, it's magnified and it's hard. Goalies tend to mature later anyway. So, you see these guys who look at all the young goalies who are doing really well, and how many of them are still with the team that they started with. I mean, Cameron Dunkley was drafted by Saskatchewan, who now has Thomas Kaisak come in to replace Lane Rushka on the active roster because they've gone through all it. Lane Rushka was drafted by Georgia. Thomas Kaisak, Saskatchewan did draft him last year. We'll see. I think he's a great young goalie. We'll see how it works out. Damude started out in San Diego.
I
Where
think
did
he
Damude start?
I think he was San Diego because Kells
And they
was
got him.
Calgary, right?
Yes, Landon Kells was in Calgary. Now, that's a little different because he's behind Christian Del Bianco, and you're not playing behind Christian Del Bianco. But Las Vegas gets him, and he's clearly a very bright young goalie prospect. Doug Jameson has stayed in Albany, so he's an example of a guy who stuck. But in that same draft, 17, 18, 19, or 18, 19, 20, the picks were Kevin Orleman, Warren Hill, and Doug Jameson. Jameson took a while, stuck around as one goalie of the year. Warren Hill, he never played. I mean, got activated a bit with Rochester, but he didn't, or with Georgia, he didn't play for them. He went to Rochester as a backup, and then eventually got a starting chance and took over from Angus Goodleaf actually in the middle of the season there. Last year before Rochester moved to Halifax, he's been very good for them. Up and down the last couple seasons, but he's a good goalie, really solid guy back there for them. And Orleman has bounced around, right? I mean, he was
He was
taken
in
by
Buffalo for a little bit this year.
Buffalo, yeah, wound up in Panther City. I thought Orleman was going to be the starter coming in Panther City. I thought that was his big chance. He was going to develop because he went to Georgia and then wound up in Panther City, and it just didn't work out. Damude stepped up and just grabbed that job. I mean, Damude earned that, and Orleman's bounced around, and now he's in Rochester where he's out right now. He's had some shoulder injuries, he had surgery in that, so he won't be back till next year. But these young goalies, it takes a while. It's very challenging. Um, yeah, so yeah,
It's tough. It's tough.
and
Yeah. And nobody ever
yeah,
wants to sacrifice a game because each one of these games is so important. These jobs are so hard to get as a coach or a GM. You
yeah,
can't really afford to wait usually. Not every team is committed as the ownership group that is now the Firewolves is to Glenn Clark. And I mean, and now
yeah,
you're seeing it pay dividends. So, I mean, you keep people for a
yeah,
while and you believe in a vision, and then now you're getting to see the fruits of it. But it's so hard for these teams because you have a bad season or two, and all the fans are. I mean, look,
Yeah,
everybody's ready. They want his head on a platter, and it's like,
yeah,
guys, they went
yeah,
big a couple years ago. You knew it was
yeah,
going to cost them if it didn't, even if it worked out and they won a championship.
yeah.
You know, you just gambled half of your future to get there. So it's like,
Yeah, I think Philadelphia's got some long-term issues they're going to have to address, and it's going to be challenging. I think Vegas does as well, as far as young teams go. But I think the example of Glenn Clark is a good one because like you said, they've had a ton of patience. He explained to them, "Hey, I've got it's a 5-year plan. Here's how we go," and they're like, "Okay, we buy in." And it was, lots of teams say they're going to buy into that plan until the reality hits. And I talked to Glenn Clark before the or around the draft and said, "Hey, it's pretty exciting to have the first pick. Obviously you want to be better, and you don't get the first pick very often, right? I mean,
yeah.
in theory, you could get it again next year." He's like, "If we have the first pick again next year, I'm not going to be the guy making it." That's a good point. Like, you don't go back to back last places, and even with a very patient front
Yeah.
office, I don't. I think if Albany was 6-10 right now instead of 10-6, there'd be some different conversations going on.
Yeah, no, I mean, and because you can only give them so long before you do it, but yeah, to after a 3-16 or 3-15 season, it was just like, man, I know Albany not knowing much about box lacrosse. You had a couple of people who understood the picks that were coming in, that guys were kind of
Yeah,
aging up, but there was so many fans who were like, this coach has to go, and I'm like, bud, just give it a year. Wait, just
yeah,
wait.
it'll be a year.
There's a plan.
Yeah,
Yes, I know it sucks, and like when they traded Q and Resetaris and everybody was up in arms, like my nephew and guys were like, "Oh, they're getting rid of all the goal scorers." I was like, getting an
they didn't
extra
score
two
any goals
goals,
anyway.
right, and getting an extra 2 goals a game is not going to
Yeah.
help us. Like we have bigger issues than 2 goals a game.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, with Q and Resetaritz and all those guys and McCardle and that, they were like the lowest scoring team in the league. I mean, that wasn't helping them really. I mean, so and the thing, like the Q trade, Q's fantastic. He's having a great year with Georgia, but boy, Ethan Walker came in that trade,
Oh my
and
goodness.
he is dynamic and a big part of the future for this team. Resetaritz, I believe, left as a free agent to go to
Yeah.
Philly. Well, what are you going to do? I mean, they tried to keep him, and he wanted to go to Philly. So,
No, yeah, but
and
the fans, they don't look at it like
yeah,
that. They look at it as
yeah,
they lost him. And I'm like,
yeah,
guys, this is a pain for him to fly into. It's a like, yeah, no, what are we gonna do? Just have a bunch of money to have one guy who needs a bunch of other guys around him to play good and watch the rest of Terrace show?
yeah. Yeah, no, and again, Reston is great. He's this year he's on the verge of becoming the first American to score 100 points in a season 3 times. Like, he's a great player, but you can't mortgage your entire future around some players that it's just not really working out with anyway. Overall, I mean, Russ Harris and Q were great for Albany in a lot of ways, but they weren't winning, and you rejig it, but as you pointed out, not all management groups, ownership groups are going to wait. And I think Albany's pretty stoked that they did now because this looks like a good team for the future. And we haven't, I mean, we've talked about Jameson, we've talked about the forwards. Look at the D. Nick Tchaikovsky is probably the most underrated player in the league. I think he'll be on Team Canada this year for the World Championship. Nobody
Yep.
even talks about him.
Yep.
Colton Watkinson, people do notice because he's a bit flashier, but he's a great player. But Patrick Katchuk, the youngster, and then the picks this year, Volkov and Young. Zach Young has been great for them. Is such a steady defender, so smart, so
Last week
reliable.
wasn't his best game, but that's really
Yeah,
the only one that I've seen where you're like, oh man. But he, I mean, guys have bad games. It is what it is. But
yeah,
Chuck,
and
he,
rookies especially, right?
yeah, no, Chuck and Volkov, and like you said, most of the time Young, their defense, they had a couple struggles last week, but it is what it is. You got a young team, you got to let guys get through it, just like we talked about with the goalie. And fortunately, they put themselves in a position. I think the bigger thing has been the poise to win a couple of those close games. That's what I
Yeah.
did not expect, is I thought any of these close games were going to go like last week's did with Toronto, just because it's a young
Yeah.
team. You would expect
The other
most of
funny
those.
thing too, yeah, is that the rhetoric going into the season, everyone was like, everyone I talked to had Albany missing the playoffs, winning like 6 games, and I was like, no, they're going to easily hit 6 games. And I said in my season preview, they could triple their three from last. They could win 9 games if things go really well. Well, they got to that 2/3 of the way through the season. Now there's so much excitement, but now they've lost 4 games in a row, and people are like, "Oh, the sky is falling. This is terrible." No, actually, they've played okay. They had 1 or 2 really bad games. I mean, was it the Rochester game, the one where they just played terribly? I
Yeah.
mean, it was a
They,
terrible
well, they
game.
they played bad. They were missing a couple key guys
Yeah,
for a couple
yeah,
of these games, but you want to get these
it
out of the
happened.
way. It's like you said it
Well, yeah,
when they were on their winning streak. You
yeah,
nobody expected Albany to go 18-0. Like no, it was
no,
never a
yeah,
thought. And then when they
no,
started losing, everybody was like, "It's the end of the world." It's like they're young
yeah,
guys that
it's
have
not.
to go through this playing against the world's best. So yeah,
Yeah, and if you look at last week's game against Toronto, that was basically a 2-goal game, then you had the goalie goal. They scored 7 goals. One of them came and settled 5-on-5 offense. They got a bunch of goals in transition. Alex Simmons had a gorgeous pair coming in bench transition. They got a power play goal. They got things like that. But I didn't realize until I spoke to Glenn Clark actually afterwards that they went back and charted and they outchanced Toronto on inside chances something like I think it was like 17 or 18 to about
it
7.
it was Nick
They
Rose.
scored
Yeah,
on 0 of them.
yeah.
And that's the problem. You got to bury those, but that'll happen sometimes. But they had great chances. They'll come. They'll
Yeah,
come.
I think you had a very veteran goalie in Nick Rose playing against, for the most part, a bunch of young men, and yeah,
Yeah.
no, watching the game live, you knew it because everybody was getting shut down inside. We had a bunch of great
Mm,
looks. I mean, and just to beat him though, you had to Firth's goal. It was crazy goals that were beating him. It was
yeah.
yeah, it was nuts. Rose was definitely I think the player of that
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And
game.
the other way was Tchaikovsky,
Yeah,
right? I mean, Tchaikovsky was great for
yeah.
Albany.
Yeah, and especially if Albany had won, then everybody'd be talking about it. But no, the transition, the Albany offense, they go through slumps. That's the biggest problem is if they hit one of these slumps going into a playoff game where you need to, it's going to be tough. They get a lot of transition goals, but man, sometimes that offense gets dormant.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's again, young players. It's going to happen, but
Yeah,
you keep
we've been
creating those
uh,
chances.
we've been doing this for 50 minutes, so we got off on a tangent. This is going to take a while now to get going, but
It happens.
yeah, thank you so much, Stamper. I love talking about all this stuff, especially the finer details. And me, I only really follow the Firewolves like you follow the rest of these teams. So to understand the GM moves and the stuff like that, I appreciate it. And just getting the history of like where Dunkerley came from, because here I thought maybe he was just somebody New York's had that they were like, okay, this is the future. I'm used to hockey though too with the farm programs. You brought that up last week that
Yeah.
without having the ALL officially associated where you can keep draft picks, so many of these
Yeah.
guys have to move around because you can't afford to keep players that you're
Yeah.
not going to play for a couple years.
Yeah, exactly. I'd love to see that, where teams can maintain the rights of players in a minor league. Now, that comes with all kinds of issues, like you got to pay them. How much are you paying them? Like, where's that money coming from? Teams are struggling anyway to meet their payrolls now. Like, I know there's been talk of, hey, let's double some guys have proposed, hey, let's double the payroll, the salary cap, and give these guys enough money that they don't have to be working all the time during the week, that they can live on this for the season and not have to have another job. And then we can do weekday games and all. There's huge steps this league can take, but boy, it's the chicken and egg thing, right? Like which has to come first for some of these things to happen. So
Panther
I mean,
City and
again, I don't know
Albany
what led me on that
fans.
tangent.
No, Panther City and Albany fans have to show up. If you want
Yeah,
teams to be able to do it, every team in the
yeah,
league, now that Albany's having a great year, last night was great. The last game against Toronto, I mean, granted, we had probably close to 1,000 Toronto fans there, but we had
yeah,
over 5,000. That was a big night for Albany, and I laughed because until all these teams are like Buffalo or Colorado does a great job. The Rough House does a good job. Vancouver is
yeah,
always packed. You look at
yeah.
some of these teams, Toronto, obviously they do great. And until all the teams are there, you can't really afford to do it.
I'll tell you though, Toronto has had struggles over the years. They had to move from whatever it's called now, the ACC. It was the ACC. Was it
Hamilton, you're
Scotiabank
talking?
Center?
Yeah.
No, from Toronto,
Oh, okay.
right? From where the Leafs and the Raptors play. They had to move from there because they just, they were a fourth tenant and they didn't get great lease stuff. They didn't get great options. They go to Hamilton and they're a huge central tenant in that building, and things have gone really well, but they struggled to get by in Toronto with the huge cost of that building. They needed a lot of fans and they just weren't getting it. And they could have 10 or 11,000 fans in Toronto and not break even. right? Yeah, I think they needed around 11 or so to break even there. In
That's
Hamilton, the
crazy.
number is lower, but they're getting great percentages of the house filled, and fans are really into it. And I know there are people who are still upset at the Rock for moving. Folks who went to the games and say now it's too far. Well, it was too far for other people before, and I don't mean to be flippant about it, but they've got to do what's best for the team to survive and for the league
Yeah.
to survive. And there are lots of challenges like that.
Well,
Can
that's
Panther
why
City keep going with their crowds, like you
no.
pointed out earlier? I don't see it.
And the Riptide, if they had all showed up, then it wouldn't even been an option. Jeff Teat would still be playing in Long Island, but they didn't show up,
Well,
so
except
now
that
they're
their
going to
arena's
Montreal.
being destroyed. So what were they going to do?
But there's no other option down there that's feasible.
Yeah,
Is what I mean. It's not, which is crazy because in New York City you've got, but you can't. Madison Square Garden is not going to be a box lacrosse community, and like you said, once you start talking those higher rates, when you got to
mhm,
pay that kind of fee, you just can't compete with these teams. So really,
yeah.
until the fans show up everywhere, it's kind of going to be what it is. But now we're going off on another tangent.
I'm excited about Ottawa, by the way. I can't wait to see those games. But that's the closest team to me now.
It is, and I'm really hoping that Albany gets their attendance numbers up consistently. Otherwise, I'm expecting Albany to not be here for much longer either. So.
Yeah, the Laval Firewolves,
Ah, no, it doesn't have a
maybe.
good ring. Doesn't have a good ring to it.
No,
No, it's maybe the Panther City Laval team somehow you guys can work that out.
could be, could be.
All right.
We'll see.
Thanks so much, and we'll do it again next week.
Sounds good. Thank you.